Hello fellow book nerds, this is Gabby and today we're going to be talking about Shadow of the Gods. So if you don't know, Shadow of the Gods is the newest book by John Gwynne, who's the author of the Malice series that I've never read, but this is an adult fantasy inspired by like Viking mythology, culture, whatever you want to call it. So this book just came out this month. So firstly, let me tell you a little bit about the story. So basically we're set in this world where it's, like I said, Viking inspired, and the old gods have fought and they died, and the gods think like bear, fox, dragon, like that kind of gods, and they all had this enormous fight. All of them died. However, before they died, they managed to like sire some children. So we have these people called Tainted that have the blood of the gods in them, and usually that gives them special powers, but not like superpowers, more like enhanced strength, enhanced ability to hunt, smell. They have this like battle state they go into, depends on what the god that they're descended from is. So that's kind of the setting of the world, and the plot is a little bit hard to describe unless we go into specific characters. So we have three main points of views: Orca, Varg, and Elvar. So Varg is a young boy who was a slave, or what's called a thrall in this world, and they're basically enslaved people, and he was a slave. He killed his master and ran away, and now he's looking for a witch to perform a ritual for him so that he can find out why his sister died, and he wants to take revenge for his sister. And he does meet a witch, but in order to get the witch to perform the spell, he has to join Bloodsworn, who are this group of like warriors, and he has to like fight to get into the group. Then we have Orca, and she lives with her husband and her young child. Both her and her husband have history of being like very prolific warriors. However, now they kind of retired, they just live in their cottage, and that plot point kind of think like Taken. Basically it's Taken, but gender switched, I guess. Then we have Elvar. She's part of the Battlegrim, which is another group of warriors who are basically mercenaries. So they will like hunt and like they're bounty hunters, basically bounty hunters. They will go and hunt tainted people and bring them to like the highest bidder. And she's part of them. And her story is kind of like, I think, Pirates of the Caribbean, kind of with the looking for a treasure. I don't want to tell you more. Those are our main characters, and I wouldn't really call it an overarching plot because each of them is doing something else, but we do have this big connecting world of the Tainted and the Thralls and the Battlegrim and whatever. So normally I separated the plot, writing, characters and themes, so I guess we can do that a little bit, but we're actually gonna start with writing. So I thought the writing was really engaging, and the author did such a good job of like weaving all of these words that were made up, and there was a made up language and not really explaining in text, but it still made sense. There was a glossary, which I didn't realize until I finished the book, but there is one at the very end. But still, I feel like the author did such a good job. This is not really normally my scene. Like, I do like adult fantasy, but this is like Viking and all that, like, you know, maybe not my vibes always, but I didn't really have a problem of understanding the writing. I thought it was super engaging. I always wanted to continue, even though it took me a while to read this book. But when I was reading, I was like really into it and really engaged. And I think what was really cool as well is how each character's perspective was quite distinct and their personalities were very distinct. I did keep getting confused with Varg and Elvar on their plot lines because they were very similar to an extent, like not the jumping off point, but where they eventually got. I was like, I don't remember who's doing what. I don't know if that's a writing complaint or plot complaint. Overall, I thought the writing was really well done and quite accessible, even if you're not that much into high fantasy. I didn't find it hard to get into or hard to get through. I found it really nice and easy to read and really engaging as well. So I think the writing was done very well. So the plot was really engaging because I kept thinking like, what's gonna happen? Where are we going? I did like expect the plot lines to connect, and they do kind of in the end. Like, if you really pay attention, it's really cool. Like, I kind of want to reread it just to see all the breadcrumbs that were left that I didn't connect at the time, but it all makes sense now. So I really love that. I really love an aspect where I can go through a book and then I kind of feel like I want to read it just because I will have better understanding of the characters, the world, and the plot, because it's all intricate. So I really liked that element, how that was executed. I thought it was done very well, and the whole world itself was really fascinating. It was, like I said, inspired by Vikings, and the author himself, I think he's like a Viking recreator, which I assume is like medieval time, like recreator, similar thing, where you like dress up and recreate battles and stuff. That's my guess, but clearly he's like really into it, and I think that was done very well. Like the Norse world, of at least our understanding of the Norse world, was really well translated and really well adapted, because I did feel like these people were so honorable, and like being a warrior was so important. It definitely felt like it was set somewhere in the north, really cold, and like it just had very visceral descriptions of what they're wearing and that kind of thing, and their battle gear, and all of that felt very authentic and very consistent with my idea of Vikings and like Norse mythology and stuff. I don't know that much, I'm not like an expert or anything, but it was consistent and it was really cool to see. It felt like, I haven't watched the show The Vikings, but I did kind of feel like that, like grim, realistic portrayal of the Vikings, whereas maybe, I don't know, something like How to Train the Dragon, you know, like, was that inspired by Vikings? I think it was. There's like a more colorful, pretty picture, and then you have like very like real grim setting, and I think that was done very well. The gods were really interesting, and the world's hierarchy was really interesting, because we have the thralls, which are basically slaves, but then we also have the tainted, which are like half gods or descendants of gods, and we have normal humans. And I feel like it could have been explained a little bit better, because there was one scene when they had this, like, they were said a thrall, and the thrall was like hunting, and he was like sniffing on the floor and like going to find the track of whoever they were hunting, and they were like, oh, it's a human, and like it didn't even say that it's a human, it just said that it's like described it as a human afterwards, and it was just so jarring. I was like, wait, so thralls are human? I thought there were some creature. This was like maybe 20% into it, when I was like, oh wait, they're humans? Why are they behaving like this? So it was really interesting, and I still don't really understand what it takes to be a thrall. Like, why do you get enslaved? Can anyone get enslaved? I assume so. You just have to put the special collar on them. I found it a little bit confusing as to what was like a freedman and thrall. Was it just their circumstance that dictated it, or was it like something about them specifically? And I think to talk about plot is important to talk about characters, so I want to get back to characters, but still think plot-wise, all of the characters were very interesting. I found them to be very unique and different from each other, but their plot lines were very similar when it came to Elvar and Varg. Both of their plot lines ended up being a group of warriors going to find something, and with Elvar I was very clear on what they were trying to find, and with Varg for some reason I just kind of erased from my memory what they were trying to find, and they were like trying to find it, and I was like, what's happening? And then sometimes if we were like in the middle of the point of view but I forgot who it was just like a little hard to get to what was happening, because they were doing such similar things. Then I think Orca's like definitely has a very separate storyline. Like I said, it's basically the movie Taken. I don't want to tell you exactly what happens, but that will give you the flavor of the plot there. But I really like how it all escalated. I think all the groups had very cool secondary characters as well, which was really cool to see. Orca was the easiest because there was only 2 secondary characters really, so it was easy. And then Varg and Elvar, again, I could remember like the biggest secondary characters, but the tertiary characters, they could be totally exchanged because it's basically the same thing. So I don't know if I would change it, but I did find it very confusing with the 2 storylines being so similar. But the saving grace there was that the main characters were not similar, even if what they were doing was very similar. And I really liked how women were portrayed in this book, actually, because I guess because it's based on Norse mythology, but the women were just like such badasses, really strong, and there was not really sexism, at least not that I could see. In terms of like the world was not sexist, no one was surprised that the scariest warrior was a woman. No one made degrading comments because they were women. No one said you can't join this battle grim or whatever because you're a woman. No one said that, and that wasn't a thing. It was not something mentioned. So I don't know if we're supposed to think that the world is just doesn't really have sexism. I really like that. I don't know. I think sometimes it's important to so struggle for underrepresented or underprivileged group, but sometimes it's fun to just see like a world where people just exist and like it's accepted. I kept waiting for someone to make a comment because the two main characters, they're very bad, like really badass warriors, and I kept someone to be sexist to them, and they weren't. And I don't know if, so my idea of Norse culture, of Viking culture, was that women were still warriors and they were respected warriors. So unless I'm mistaken, I guess that was the inspiration and that was the reason behind it. I really, really like that choice. I love seeing like badass women who took what they wanted in terms of like a partner, like what they want out of life, like splitting skulls, whatever. I just really loved seeing that, and I love that I would say the softest character would actually be the male point of view character, because he was the least experienced in battle and he was the least bloodthirsty as well. And I love that. And I love that one of the main characters, Orca, she's a mother, but like still she's so badass, and her love for her son isn't seen as a weakness or anything. It's just like her driving force, and I loved seeing that. That storyline just killed me because I love the happy family and I knew something was gonna happen, and it did. Very, very, very much in love with the characters, even if they weren't like individually maybe my favorite type of character that I'm into. I could really appreciate what they did. I loved how they broke down gender stereotypes or whatever, because I was not expecting it from a Viking Norse adult fantasy written by a man to have really good compelling female characters. I know that he also wrote Malice, and I think that has a female character. I've not read that book, that I'm not sure how he was portrayed there, but I think people really love it, so maybe he's just good at it. But again, I was just so appreciative of the complexities of the female characters and how well that was handled. In terms of the themes, so we're moving on from characters, the theme discussed, I think the author did quite a lot of interesting things towards the end as well, and it was definitely a lot about oppression and the existence of the tainted and thralls. It was really interesting to see how they were treated by different characters and what that said about the characters. And then it kind of, without spoiling anything, a lot of characters had their perspective change throughout, because we also find out things about them and they find out things about themselves. So it was really cool to see. I liked seeing the subject being kind of touched upon, but it wasn't too broadly, too deeply discussed, I wouldn't say. It wasn't like big speeches about it, whatever, because that's not really the style of this book, but you can definitely see different characters being motivated differently depending on where they came from. It's also with the character of Varg, who was a thrall or a slave, and then he became a freedman. And it was really cool to see his perspective on things and how he approached everything because of his background. And then we have characters who are free from the get-go and how they see thralls and that kind of thing. And you can just really see how people, depending on what they were taught, that's what they think. Yeah, it was really interesting in that sense. And then definitely another big theme was the dead gods, right? There was a very interesting conversation there with letting evil into the world and giving power to people who don't necessarily deserve it. So for example, Elvar, part of the mercenary group she's in, there's an interesting conversation there about if someone being a good person or someone you like, but at the same time being a slaver, basically. And also like, again, what are you willing to sell and what's the most important thing? And in this like world, basically the most important value for all of these characters is battle fame. And they say that everyone dies, it doesn't matter, because if you have a battle fame, you will survive forever in songs and in poems and stories. So everyone wants to get to battle fame, and there is an interesting perspective added from a character separate to like the band of the mercenaries and the warriors, who is like, that's not what you should be living for, that's depressing, you should be living for your kin, your family. And then another character's like, my family's always been shite, I don't live for my family, kin doesn't matter, it's the family you choose for yourself. So a lot of interesting conversations about family and values and what really should drive you in the life. And I think this whole concept of battle fame was very unique, not necessarily something that we see discussed a lot as like the main value. Not a lot of books have this literally to go to a battle and win and get battle fame. It doesn't matter if you die, just get battle famous. that was like the most you could do, you know, with your life. So very interesting conversations, and I really enjoyed them. So that's pretty much my review. Personally, I really like this book. It's not something I normally pick up, but I will want to read the sequel, and I did get quite invested, and I originally gave it 3.5 stars, but I think I'm gonna bump it up to 4 because talking about it, I realized how much I enjoyed it, especially the aspect of the nuanced characters and the interesting conversations there. I just really think this was a very well done, very well written story. If you enjoy Norse mythology, if you enjoy talks of honor and like very gory, this book is gory, so be prepared for that. A lot of fighting, but maybe not like so choreographed, but very like raw, intense fight scenes with basically life on stake and people dying right and left. This book probably is for you if it sounds like something you're interested in. I think it was very well written with very cool characters and world, and I would highly recommend it. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you wanted to know any of my thoughts on, if you enjoy dedicated reviews, I have a whole playlist when I talk about loads of new releases every month. Like I said, every month I talk about what books are coming out, and then I review one of them, and this is that review. You guys voted for The Shadow of the Gods, so I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, if you could like, comment, subscribe, I would really appreciate it. It really helps me out. But that's it for me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!